The view that law comes from opinions is a notion, a theory, which has gained in popularity, especially over the last century or so. And it rests on the idea that knowledge can't be known. Rather pessimistic view, but it, as I say, it's risen in popularity to the point where many people are inclined to accept it. Certainly in practice, it appears to be that way. The reason for that is that we have these different sources of opinions that give us our laws, and therefore we can look back on it, and a superficial view will suggest that those laws that we have really only just come down to various types of opinions. And we'll go through some of these possibilities. The first three we tend to find in our culture at the present time, not necessarily in our culture historically, and not necessarily, certainly not in other cultures, either contemporary cultures or historical. What are the sources of opinions? The first, which is the way we usually think when we're first presented with this problem, is that the majority opinion is what a society should follow. This would suggest that the opinion of 6 out of 10 people gives us justice, gives us truth, and so we can run with that. And the idea is that we don't have any other source. And so we have in democratic theory, which has been the dominant political theory in the developed world for about the last couple of centuries, the majority has their opinion. They elect a parliament to represent them, who are simply bringing to our houses of government their opinions, arguing them out, in our case Liberal versus Labor, with a few other parties scurrying around in the shadows. And the result of that is the Acts of Parliament, the statutes that provide our basic framework of law. And in this unit, we're going to be looking at a number of statutes, Acts of Parliament, as the basic foundation, the framework within which our legal system, our property legal system, our property law system is framed. And so where's the reality in all that? Well, there's an implicit assumption that the majority know what reality is, what's really right or wrong. The curious thing, of course, is that about every 3 or 4 years, we're likely to elect a different party, and they might have different opinions. And so they come and go. But they provide the basic framework. The second source of opinions is the courtroom. In a courtroom, we have two sources of opinions. We have juries, 12 honest men or women that are called upon to make the final call, especially in criminal cases. And that's meant to represent the opinion of the common man. We could say, well, it's just because that particular set of 12 thought one way and a different set of 12 would think another, and we'll find a fair bit of very good literature actually exploring that. 12 Angry Men is one piece of literature that comes to mind. It was expressed in a movie. The idea that even in a jury, the opinion of the majority may not necessarily be the truth. And that movie in particular, I think you can probably find it on Netflix or YouTube, is really worth watching for what it says about human nature and the notion of relying on the opinions of 12 people. If 12 people are being relied upon to give you the opinion of the common man, who's supposed to be common sense and down to earth and so on. That's a good approach. In other cases, in other situations in courtrooms, we rely on the judge or judges to be able to give their opinion. The advantage of the judges is that they're considered to be learned people, aloof from the comings and goings of normal human life and certainly of the controversies that are put before them. And so with their deeper learning, maybe advanced intellects and so on, they will be able to give a more robust opinion. You'll find that in the assignment, much is relying on the opinions of the judges, which is really what you'll be exploring. However, it's still an opinion. One way or another, the judges will be trying to argue, to explain, to defend their opinions in many cases. And you'll see that with many of the cases that through your studies in law you will be exposed to. This learned reflection, it's probably more reliable than the opinion of the common man, or in some ways, how does it relate to the majority of the people? They're all open questions. While these are the three sources of opinions that we rely on largely in our culture, in the wider spectrum of human experience, we can't discount the situations in history and perhaps in the future of tyrants. A tyrant is a person who holds authority, usually without the good of those people under his authority in mind. In the book The Republic by Plato, a fair part of the, almost half of the book, The Republic, is a discussion between mainly two people, the philosopher Socrates and the sophist Thrasymachus, where Thrasymachus does an excellent job of arguing the benefits of defining justice as the will of the stronger party. We know that notion today as might equals right, and generally we don't think much of it. In the Republic, over 100 pages or so, there's this exploration of all the different ways that it appears to be a very persuasive theory of justice. It says there's no real meaning to justice apart from opinions, and in the end of the day, the strongest party, most influential, will provide the opinion that all others must obey. Interesting concept. It's a book worth reading, The Republic by Plato, and as well as discussing might equals right in the opinion of Thrasymachus, it also explores many other concepts, and in particular what Plato refers to as the defective forms of government. When Plato does that, the second last form of government that Plato considers is democracy. In ancient Greece, in Plato's experience, there were several Greek states, and they had several different forms of government representing many approaches of humanity to order itself as a sizable society. And so Plato was simply looking at them, trying to work out how they fitted together, which ones were better or worse. And those reflections are in The Republic. Relatively small section of The Republic, and definitely worth reading. You can download it online or borrow a copy from your library and so on. Both for the discussions between Socrates and Thrasymachus, but also, and I'd say almost especially, for that short little discussion on democracy. It's about 3/4 of the way through the book. It only occupies a handful of pages, and it remains as relevant today, and probably even more insightful today, than when Plato first wrote it. All of these things explore the question of laws from opinions, simply because we have a social system in Australia at present which is democratic, elects our parliaments, and the whole judicial system with its judges and juries works within this overall framework. The question is not so much as a question of whether laws and our understanding of justice should come from opinions, but rather where do the opinions come from? Because we know that opinions vary with time and place and person. We've given a couple of examples of different times and places and people where opinions vary. But is there anything behind the opinions? Is there anything that can be explored and justified, tested, and so on, to give us something more certain? Shall we say, give us truth? And that is the live question, especially at our part of history, and especially in connection when we find conflicting notions of property rights conflicting with each other. And in particular in Australia, we're finding the conflict between customary property rights and what I will call Anglo-Australian property rights, the normal property rights we operate. Understanding how we can test which opinion is stronger is a very important question to explore yourself. Okay. Now, we mentioned the tyrant before, and I just want to come back to that just briefly. That the influencing of people, which usually requires some sort of power, not necessarily military power or even economic power, but possibly psychological power or the power of public discourse, which we could perhaps refer to as the media. These different forms of power are important to the extent that they can form or deform our opinions of how well our ideas of justice conform with reality. That will be a question that we will be looking at further as we move along.